Hey, I'm Colin Smith and I'm a photographer. Today we're going to talk about the new iPhone 14 Pro. We're just going to look at the camera, we're going to take some shots and we're going to examine them and see just how good it is. We will also compare it to the iPhone 13 Pro for a reference. And being a big classic rock fan, I couldn't resist getting the color Deep Purple. There's basically three cameras in here. There's a zoom, there's the regular camera, and then there's the wide angle. The zoom camera is still the same, it's pretty much unchanged. The wide angle, though, has changed a little bit, but where the real upgrade is happening is in the main camera. So number one, it has a larger sensor, which really is a big deal, because a larger sensor enables you to capture more light. It also enables you to get more background blur, bokeh, like naturally rather than using portrait mode. But the important thing about capturing more light is it just can give you cleaner photographs, especially in low light conditions. But what they're doing is quad Bayer. So the Bayer sensor is basically what captures the light and is assigned to different colors. So by being able to put these into different regions where four of the sensors are going to act as one larger sensor, that will give you better low light performance. So when you go into the camera app, you're going to see four options. The first one is 0.5. 0.5 is going to use the wide angle. And this is great, as I said, for landscape and just shooting things when you want a nice wide view. So it's also popular with the younger people where they're doing 0.5 selfies, where literally they're shooting themselves with the back cameras with the wide angle camera. The 1X. The 1X is using the main camera. This is the new camera. And out of the box, all of these cameras are working at 12 megapixels. We'll talk about the 48 in just a second. So when I tap on 2X, it uses the new camera. The second one, all it does is it takes that 48 megapixels and it just crops it down into the center 12 megapixels and gives you a 12 megapixel image. So there's no difference between doing that, shooting with the wider lens, and then cropping it yourself in Lightroom. And in fact, I would say I would probably rather crop it myself in Lightroom or Photoshop because you could change the composition a little bit and not necessarily shoot in the center. And then of course, the third option is here when we go to 3, and then when we hit 3, then we go to our optical zoom lens. So as I said, the magic is happening here inside this new camera. So how do we get the 48 megapixel? Well, if you look at the top on the app, there's a setting for RAW. You just tap and it goes into RAW. Now, they call it ProRAW. It's just RAW. It's actually a DNG file. But RAW is very important because what it does is it gives you more dynamic range, meaning it can hold more shadow detail and it can also hold more highlight detail at the same time. So when you edit it, you can recover more detail from the shadows and the highlights, and it gives you more dynamic range. The other thing is RAW can actually shoot at a higher bit depth, and that bit depth just means it's a larger container that can hold more colors. So all around, it's better. So I'm actually going to head out to the beach and we're going to shoot with this camera, and then we're going to look at these photographs in Lightroom and examine them in Pixel Peep and see exactly what we're getting out of this camera. Let's look at the regular photos so we can get a side-by-side comparison. In a second, we'll look at the RAW, which is a totally different thing. So if we look on the left, this is the iPhone 13 Pro. On the right is the iPhone 14 Pro, and we can tell because of the little blue here because I gave them that tag. So here we are. If we zoom out, we can see they're very similar. One of the things I am noticing though is we're getting a little bit more of the background blur, and this is not using portrait mode, so this is natural depth of field that we're seeing here in the lenses. So there's a little bit more because of the larger sensor, but let's look at the details here in the bricks. You know, I'm not seeing a ton of difference between the two. Now the one on the left is the 14, we can see the blue there. And there's the one on the right. So I'm looking at these and I can see, you know, both of them have a similar kind of amount of detail here in the plant. Although I do notice on the 14, look at the edges. We still got a little bit of fringing on the edges, but not as much as we had on the 13. Look at the edge halos around here, much worse. Then when we look at this, look at the background. We look at the bokeh or the out of focus area. And I can see a kind of very similar kind of painterly AI kind of looking bokeh here. Looks pretty similar on both of them. Now the detail here on the flower, I do feel like the colors and the texture seem a little bit more natural here versus the 13. Look at the 13. See how it's kind of, the contrast is really kind of pushed and enhanced a lot more. Fine detail here is looking good. It's looking very good on both of these. I'm seeing a little bit more detail in the flower here on the 14 versus the 13. All right, let's have a look at the cactus itself. So look at these little points here. Yeah, I'm seeing, just a little bit of fringing. See a little bit of fringing there and not as much fringing on here. And now we're looking at the flat. Let's look at the flat detail. Definitely more texture. See how this texture is kind of coming through. And if you look at the one on the left, which is on the 13, not as much texture in the smooth areas. All right, so let's check out the low light. Now on these, the one on the right is the 14. The one on the left is the 13. Okay, so we're looking here into the trees, into the sky. Yeah, it's definitely a little less noise on the 14. Although I'm looking in some of the areas here, looks like it's got a little bit worse with some of the halos. All right, let's see where this really changes. Let's go to the raw files. So here's that same night shot. Now here's the thing about a raw file. You've got to remember a JPEG is processed in camera, so it's always going to look better initially. A RAW file is designed for processing later, so it has more dynamic range, has a larger color space, but also the settings are not baked in, which is why when you initially look at them, they don't necessarily look as good. Kind of like a log in a way, but a little bit better than a log. But when we go into the develop, we get a lot of leeway to adjust this. So if I wanted to open up the exposure a little bit, look at this. There's a lot more dynamic range in this image. So I'm just opening up the exposure. Look, I can turn it into daytime. Let's recover the highlights and maybe pop the shadows open a little bit more. And we can see, look at this. I mean, you're not necessarily going to process it like this, but I just want you to see how much dynamic range is in this photograph. And look, when we go up here, we've got this nice soft kind of a focus here. It's not as harsh or sharp. So let's compare there's our raw file on the left. On the right is our HEIC. So as you can see, I mean, look at the difference. Now, of course, when we're shooting on this raw file here, this is also a 48 megapixel file, so it's almost a 50 megapixel file. So we've got a lot more information in this, which means that we can zoom in, as you can see, twice as much. Let's have a look at another example where we can really see the detail. So if we look at this particular image and we zoom in, you can see there's a lot of stuff going on here. Lots and lots of detail. Let's switch to the other one. And this is the zoomed in version of the raw file. But look how it just holds the details so much better. It's just a much more natural looking photograph. This is 100% view, of course. You can see that. Look at the colors versus the HEIC. See how it has this kind of sizzly kind of, where the whites are blowing out and there's a lot of halos and stuff around there versus a much smoother image showing more realistic textures. Just to kind of show how much is in a raw file. So here's a shot here. And if we look at it, you can see, yes, it's a DNG, which is the format it saves in, which is the raw file. Watch how much dynamic range is in a raw file that you're just not going to get in the other file formats. So let's open up the shadows here. Look at this. Let's recover the highlights. And if we look at this before and after, look how much dynamic range we can pull out of this image because it's a raw file. Okay, so let's do a process here. So we're just going to jump into the develop and I'm going to make some quick settings here. All right, so there's before and after. So you can see you can get some really nice looking images. Let's zoom in here. Let's do a quick conclusion and my recommendations. So we looked in Lightroom and we could see, it's great having the 3 cameras, but there's not a huge difference in the other 2 cameras from the last version of the iPhone. If you're just going to be shooting in the normal mode, it's really, if you're just doing it for the camera, it's not worth it unless you decide to go into the RAW mode. And now the RAW mode actually really is good. I'm actually very surprised by the quality of the images. They don't look over-processed, even though it is using computational photography. Computational photography is when it shoots multiple images and then it stitches it together and uses AI to just bring out the best image. So that's why they always kind of look a little bit enhanced when you use them on the phone. But in this case, the RAWs actually look really good. They look quite realistic. And let me mention, Android users have had cameras like this for a while. I have, 50 megapixel cameras on my Google Pixels. So it's not new, it's just new to the iPhone. But anyway, if there's anything else you'd like to see me test on here, let me know in the comments. And if you're new, welcome to Photoshop Cafe. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, you won't miss any of my videos. Do me a favor, hit that like button. And until next time, I'll see you at the cafe.